Welcome back to EPG. I'm, of course, Greg, your host. This week saw an important milestone. It is the 80th anniversary of the test of the first nuclear bomb in the New Mexican desert, known as Trinity, which happened in the early morning hours of July 16th, 1945. So today I would like to talk about the three different museums that discuss the bomb and kind of the cultural and historical ramifications of it. One is American, the other two are Japanese, and so we're going to start with the American one. That is located in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was able to travel there and go through it, and it was a good museum. There's a lot of stuff to see, a lot of I would say dioramas and bombs, like mock bombs that you can see. It gets into the history of Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project and the other scientists that helped out, especially at Los Alamos and their work on the bomb there. And then it kind of gets into after the bomb, because the United States had a monopoly on it for a few years, and all the different kind of new bombs that they were able to make. Big bombs, little bombs, thermonuclear bombs, hydrogen bombs, etc. So if you find yourself in Albuquerque, be sure to stop at this museum because, again, it's an important part of American history. Moving on to the museum that I went to when I was in Hiroshima. Very, very different museum. Basically, it focused on just the one bomb and how Hiroshima was the first city, and Japan was the first country to ever, be at the business end of a nuclear weapon. Um, it's a very, very thorough museum. It is huge. There's lots of exhibits, lots of different things it talks about, the construction of the bombs, the different kinds, Fat Man versus Little Boy, which is what the code names of the bombs were, how they're used, uranium, plutonium, and it gets into a lot of depth, which I found very, I don't want to say surprising, but they definitely got into a lot of detail because, again, it's an important event in world history, and especially for the people of Hiroshima. Moving on to the museum in Nagasaki, it's smaller than the one in Hiroshima, but they do have a lot more. I would a lot more information regarding the actual deployment of the bombs, what happened, kind of the before and after effects, etc. So yeah, all the museums are great to go to learn more about the history of the bomb. However, with the Japanese ones, it's a lot of it fell. I would say they decided to ignore a lot of the Japanese atrocities that occurred during World War II and why Harry Truman, thought the bombs were necessary. They really didn't talk about that. They instead postulated that the reason why the bombs were used was to warrant the $2 billion price tag to taxpayers. They really didn't talk about what was going on in Manchuria. They really didn't talk about what was going on, in the Pacific and POWs and a lot of the human experiments that the Japanese were doing. Yeah, they didn't really talk about that. There was one little tiny section in the back of the Nagasaki Museum behind a couple walls that had some reels going on about some of the things that the Japanese were doing, but then during those parts of the world, like Manchuria, but they just said, these are people operating on their own. They didn't get any sanction from back home, et cetera, et cetera. But I will say is that it was definitely more kind of personal um, experience in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and there are two elements of those museums that I'd like to talk about. First, in Hiroshima, one of the artifacts that they had at this museum was a rusted tricycle that they had under glass, which you can see right here. And the story behind it was that it belonged to a little boy. It was his prized possession. So every morning, all day, he would ride around his family's patio on his tricycle, having a grand old time. And then, unfortunately, when the bomb happened on August 6th, um, he was very close to the hypocenter and he was irradiated. And he got radiation burns. And because he was so close and so young, by the evening of August 6th, 1945, he had died. Um, the city was destroyed. There were a lot of dead, so there wasn't really any place to bury him. So his father took his boy, his child, and his tricycle and buried them in the backyard. And that is where they stayed for 40 years until his father had his son's body exhumed and then moved to a more appropriate resting place. And then he um, donated this tricycle to the Hiroshima Museum. It was very hard looking at that under the glass and the lights, and yeah, just thinking about, children and how war, and honestly, it's the people who suffer most during war. Civilians, soldiers too, but anyway, the second more moving part of the Nagasaki Museum was there is a photo of a boy standing there at attention with his brother, who was in a papoose in the back that looked like he was asleep. And it turned out that this boy walked to an aid station after the Nagasaki bombing with his brother in a papoose and talked to a couple of people there who were at the aid station. And aid station looked at him, looked at his brother, and then the boy put down the papoose, and the aid workers took out his brother, who had died, and placed him on a funeral pyre that they had going for other bodies in the city. And it's, again, looking at stuff like this, thinking about just how terrible and awful war is, and how, with the advent of the nuclear age and nuclear bombs, how that was meant to stop all war, much like World War I was supposed to be the war to end all wars. But unfortunately, again, human beings don't learn. We still have war, we still have death, and it's important to remember, again, we're all human. So if you have time, be sure to check out the museums in Albuquerque, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki regarding the atomic bomb. So thank you very much for your time, and get out there.